If you or someone you know is struggling with alcoholism or addiction, do not hesitate to reach out for help. You can find numerous free resources on our website, thebeginagainpodcast.com, and there are tons of resources and support networks available online, in person, or just a phone call away. You don't have to face this challenge alone. Welcome to the Begin Again podcast. I'm your host, Gary Menkes. On the Begin Again podcast, we delve into the inspiring journeys of individuals who have overcome alcoholism and addiction and emerged as true trailblazers in entrepreneurship, business, sports, and beyond. Through authentic, uplifting, and profound conversations with our guests, we aim to shatter the stigma surrounding addiction and demonstrate that recovery can be a catalyst for remarkable success, strength, and resilience. We firmly believe that by listening to these accounts, you will be empowered to unlock your own potential, instigate positive change in your life, and contribute to the creation of a better world. So, get ready to be inspired and embark on your own personal journey of growth with the Begin Again podcast. Welcome back to the Begin Again podcast. I'm your host, Gary Menkes, and joining us today has one incredible and inspiring journey from prison to the Olympics, to public speaker, to TED Talk, and now founder of PH Wellness in Southern California, Tony Hoffman. Tony, thanks for being here. Welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks for having me on, Gary. I'm looking forward to
I
it.
appreciate it. So let's get right into it. We were just talking a little bit offline. We want to focus on, we all know, we all have the war stories, right? And yours, listen, prison to the Olympics is one tagline to someone I wanted to speak to. And then when I started following you and see all that you do for the community and recovering out loud, which is a fairly new term for me, Tony, but I see in schools, speaking of people, it's the redemption stories of people. I say this is the epiphany I've had. Like, I was so shameful of some of the stuff that I had put myself through and I had done, and I'm flipping it on its head to everything I done, every bad thing that I did for myself or happened to me, I want to help someone else do. And you kind of live that. And that's who you are these days.
Yeah, for me, I was so discontent growing up. I had a miscalibrated use of instinct that was my gifts and the things that I like to do and what that actually meant. And so I always used it for a selfish purpose. And I had a very cocky demeanor, and I put a lot of people down as a result of that. And it wasn't until I had a spiritual twist on my life after I went through a lot of the turmoil that you hear people go through with addiction. For me, at the bottom, it was absolutely homelessness. But once I was able to shift my perspective about what I was supposed to be doing with myself, that is my gifts, my passions, and my experience. Those three things have some type of intersection, and that intersection is purpose. And when I realized that my purpose wasn't to go out and consume as much as I could, earn as much as I could, and take as much as I could, but the exact opposite, to give it, then I started to find that freedom from self-hatred, that freedom from discontent, where I felt like, you know what, I'm being utilized. I have found a place in the world where I'm effective. And that in itself brings me peace, because really all I want to do is just help somebody that may be in the same position as me, is say, you know what, here's what worked for me. Here's the way I saw it. Here's the way I was doing it. Here's the shift I had in perspective. And now here's the result. If you like the way that sounds, or if you like the way that looks, take it. But to take it, you have to think the way I do.
I can relate to a lot of that because everything didn't change for me, Tony, until I started working on myself. Like you had just said it, trying to consume as much as you can and take as much as you can. I mean, God willing, in May 13th, I'll be 18 years sober. And if you knew me 18 years ago, that was a complete impossibility. I would have been voted last person, elected or who would have accomplished or been giving that, I should say, because my sobriety has been completely given to me.
Yeah.
And so, 18 years ago, and I don't live in the past, but I do like to remember where I came from because I need to remember where I was. But, I was a skeptical, chip on my shoulder, everyone's out to get me, trust no one. So that wasn't an overnight, thought process shift, but slowly and surely, which I love. There's a lot of quotes I love, but like, I wish you a long, slow recovery. Like, I didn't know what that meant 18 years ago. I was like, get out of my face with that. And now it's like the greatest line you could possibly say to someone like me, because I totally get it. I wish you a long, slow recovery. But where in your journey did it start clicking? Be like, you know what? It's the giving, it's the service. Like, this is where I feel the most fulfilled and the most, as you say, finding out what a beautiful gift. You get sober, but you find true purpose in your life.
Yeah. So for me, I wasn't a spiritual person for
Mm.
23 years. It was all about self. I denied anybody and wouldn't listen to anybody that talked about any type of spirituality or formal religion, whether it was Islam, Christianity, Buddha, whatever, Confucianism. I just wanted nothing to do with anything that was more about self accountability,
Mm,
self-improvement,
yeah.
right? When we break spirituality down and we break or order religion down, really it's about
Mm,
self accountability, self responsibility, and self improvement. And we seek a higher form of self, which is the well of truth. It's our higher power. And that
yeah.
higher power guides us through how to hold self accountable in all matters. I'm the exact opposite for 23 years.
Right.
January 21st, 2007, I have a spiritual experience. If you're in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book talks about some individuals, if you want to call it, are awarded a spiritual epiphany. It's a sudden awakening or realization that self is not actually in control in the way that we think, and that self-will for us who struggle with mental health and addiction is actually taking us to destruction,
Mm,
and that we have to surrender. And on January 21st, 2007, I had a spiritual experience where I had this sudden realization that everything I thought life was about, everything that I thought was an order for life and how it went, was absolutely wrong.
yes.
And that if I kept going, I was going to go to a place that was worse. And I'm not necessarily talking about, I don't want to go to hell. That's why I changed. There
Mm,
was just something that I felt within myself that I'm going against the grain of who's actually in control of this. And if I continue, I'm really not going to like where I'm at, because I don't like where I'm at now, and it just gets worse. And so the realization for me was my opportunity to surrender.
mm.
That night, I slept in a house that was up for rent, and I was arrested. And 30 days later, I was sent to prison, which started the relationship part of how do I find my purpose? How do I pray, meditate, examine self, manifest future, etc.
It's amazing, on this, not long. I haven't been at this podcast very long, but so many people I speak to, had this moment that you're talking about, and many times it's, they pull over the side of the road. They just said, God, if you're real there, show me a sign, or God, I'm done. For me, it was, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And it was the moment. I'm also wired though. I'm so wired with low self-esteem and not, feeling so down on myself, beating myself up. Like that's how I was wired for most of my life. And it's still something that I could struggle with. So
Mhm.
even when I had that moment, my moment was May 12th of 2006. I had, and you mentioned AA saved my life. And again, this isn't, I don't care. I'm from the camp. I don't care how you get here at all, just as long as you get here. For me,
Yeah.
if someone asks
Yeah.
me what happened to me, I'm going to tell them go to a meeting, get a sponsor, and go to AA, because that's how I got sober and changed my life, for sure. But I had that moment too in my apartment, and it wasn't my lowest of lows. It wasn't my worst bottom. I've had worse bottoms, but I went away to rehab in 2002. Just to give you a quick little timeline, 2002. But I didn't get sober till 2006. So I was in and out of the rooms, and so I've had worse lows. I've been in way worse trouble and tons of arrests, and I've been in really bad places. But something was different that night, May 12th, 2006, and sitting by myself. And I just said, God, I don't want to do this anymore. But it wasn't like the light bulb, but something was different. It was the first time I poured all my booze out. I had never done that before. I was never going back to AA either, Tony. Like, listen, I might
Yeah.
have to stop drinking one day, but I'm never going back there. But lo and behold, the very next day, I'm calling AA intergroup, and I went to a meeting on May 13th, 2006, and started my journey, and it was different.
Yeah.
You mentioned spirituality. Spirituality, it's such a it's such a beautiful line. For me, I think it shows up in so many forms. And I think the biggest form for me so far is in serving, is in helping one other person, and the feeling, the fulfillment I get from doing that. And no one else has to know about it. Like it's just me and that person. But that's what spirituality is. And it's in really on the inside, right? Like my HP is within me. And that's what I pray to every single morning.
Yeah. And to me, it's when you take spirituality and you bring it in, it's about self. When you take spirituality, you push it out, it's about selfless.
Mm.
Right. So everything coming in is self-examination, self-accountability, self-improvement, self-responsibility. And then everything outward is selfless, removing ego, removing desire with a bad intent, removing motives that would take advantage and manipulate, lie, cheat, and steal, and focus on enhancement. How do I enhance that person? How do I enhance that location? How do I enhance the world? One of the things that I have prided myself on in a sense that I'm proud of is that I haven't just taken one form of recovery,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't just go into AA meetings and say, this is how you do it. So if somebody calls me and they want access to my thinking, the only type of thinking they're going to get is the thinking that the rooms gave me. I have tried to find spiritual healing and recovery through every means necessary. I didn't find the rooms Alcoholics Anonymous until I was in year 9, and it was after a major mistake that I made in a relationship that I would have never done even when I was using drugs. Prior to that, it was all Jesus Christ.
Mm.
All of the foundation of my recovery was founded on Christianity. At year 9, I found the rooms Alcoholics Anonymous. Up to year 9, I also had been in evidence-based therapy or clinical therapy with a therapist. And so I had all these different things to enhance my recovery, so to speak. And because of that, I think it's allowed me to see parts of myself and parts of my purpose and what I was actually doing in my recovery. So when somebody called me and asked for access of information of how I was able to do something, I was able to provide them different levels of perspective, different levels of input where we can take a look at self, we can go out into the world and say, okay, the 12-step program says that you can only keep what you give away. And in the rooms of Alcoholics and Narcotics Anonymous, we give away what? Our recovery through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. I truly believe that if you're not in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, if you're not in a 12-step program and you love animals, you can go to an animal shelter and you can donate your time to the enhancement of the animals that God created for Earth. If you're a person who loves the planet, you can do mission work and go to beaches and pick up trash or plant trees in forests that have been burned down, and you will receive the same return of benefit that taking somebody through the steps does, so long as this thing is calibrated correctly, right? Because when we take someone through the steps, we don't take it for them. We take it for God to see the miracle happen in them. We want God to do the miracle in them. And when we see the miracle, the cleanse of this individual, then we're enhanced.
That's really amazing, and a lot to unpack there. Obviously you have your rehabilitation, you have PH Wellness now, and you're constantly speaking, it seems, to schools and to children.
Yep.
How do you tap in? Because that's such a, it scares me too. Like, again, because this is coming from an alcoholic, right? But it seems like, and I love it too, because yes, you go into A, and I say this all the time, like there's no big sign when you walk into a meeting or a rehab, like, hey, come on in. You can completely change your life around, live life beyond your wildest dreams, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
like kind of marketed to that. Like we drag ourselves in, or we've been dragged into these rooms, right? And we think speaking for myself, my life was over. Like my life was over on May 13th, 2006. Like all my boys, all my best buddies, like I'm probably gonna have to say goodbye to them. Like, how am I gonna further my career? I'm working on some, Wall Street trading desk. How am I gonna further my career? I'm supposed to, entertain people. And you had said it, I think, from your open, everything that I thought that I knew, I was completely wrong about, like everything. And
Everything.
it's like
There
this
was
gift
nothing
of
right.
an open mind. But I use that today too, Tony. Like when something comes up and I don't agree with whatever, I'm like, well, hang on a second, it's not just Gary's way. Like, let's keep an open mind. It could be a lot of things here. And I do that just because you said evidence-based evidence. I've been so wrong about so many things, so many times, like throughout my entire life. Like it's not Gary's way. There's a lot more here. But you're saying also, and this umbrella too, because what I was getting at is there's so much more once you do get sober, and it's something I do want to convey to our audience. Like I see on your rehab, there's exercise, there's mental health, there's a lot we can do. It's, again, if you ask me, AA, the big book is maybe the biggest, the best self-improvement book in history, but who cares? Doesn't matter like where you rank it. There's so much beauty in there. And every time I read it, Tony, it's I pick up. It's like I've read this book 100 times. How do I miss some of those lines? But
Right.
you're saying too, which I think is amazing. There's other ways. Like if you love animals, you can find your inner. You can change your life by finding your inner purpose, or I guess connecting to your inner higher power. Correct, but through animals or through the environment.
Yeah. So I said this on a podcast many years ago. Human beings are the only species on this planet that just consume.
Mm.
The majority of humans just consume. The trees all take the water from the earth, create leaves, bloom, which brings in the bees. They give to the bees. They take and pump out oxygen into the air so that we can be alive. Every animal is going through a cycle of life in which it's giving back to the earth in some way. And yet the majority of human behavior is this idea of, let me see how much I can consume and take.
Yes.
What I'm essentially saying is that every one of us are designed to give, and our giving is somewhere connected between our gifts, our passions, and our experience. Some of us love giving to earth. Some of us love giving to animals. Some love giving to homeless populations. Some love going to the Dominican Republic and giving to impoverished areas there. Some love taking medical supplies into Africa and providing ways for African tribes to stay healthy, or bring water and set up water in African tribes that don't have to no longer, so they don't have to walk a 30-mile round trip.
Right.
Are ways for us to give that are specific to us. One of the things that I think is great about the 12 steps is it's a foundation.
Mm. Yes.
It is really hard to listen to somebody, especially in treatment, say, I'm not going to meetings. I don't like meetings. It's like, well, what are you going to do? In the beginning, what are you going to do? It's going to be very difficult if in the beginning, in your first year of recovery, you
Yes.
think that you're going to go to the beach and pick up trash and stay sober. Can you do it? Yes. I'm not God. I can't tell you that's not possible. Is it likely? What we understand running a treatment center? No. What's likely is that when you leave stabilization with us, you go into aftercare and you continue an outpatient program and live in sober living. If you
Mm.
live in sober living and continue treatment for at least 6 months, your ability to stay sober long-term exponentially grows. Where can you stay in recovery? Through
Yeah.
12-step programs. It gives you the foundation of, these are how you should be processing your thoughts, your emotions, your spirituality, your friendships, your relationships, your resentments, your stress,
Mm.
forward into life. Once you have built an instinctual process, you stay connected to that community. That community supports you, holds you up, gives you light, makes you feel whole, and then you go out into the world and find a way to give. If it's in the rooms at Alcoholics Anonymous, do that. If it's at the beach at the SPCA, do that. But you have to have a foundation of recovery first, for sure. I just think that once we get into the 12-step part, it can be personalized as we move further into our recovery.
I love that because the principles and the basis of the 12 steps, even though we don't really, again, talking to a guy who just came in, all I wanted to do was stop drinking. That's all I wanted to do. And I couldn't do it myself. And it seemed to be working for these people in this room. But what we learned, what I discovered is, oh my God, we're working on ourselves, right? I'm working on me. I'm writing out a list of all the things, all the resentments, all the things that ever pissed me off my whole entire life. And I'm trying to come to peace with it through somehow.
Yeah.
And then through steps 10 and 11, 12, you live in the program, right? If you do something, you write, keep my side of the street clean, right? You try to right that wrong, and you try to help others. You try to serve others. And I loved your message about that. But let me ask you, how was it when you realized inside, because you've had some journey in sobriety? I think that's wild that you were sober for 9 years and then you found AA, 9 years into it, right? And I think that's incredible that even 9 years in, you're like, hey, let me try this. Maybe I can, you keep the open mind. Let me see what AA has for me. But my question is, when did it hit you, Tony? Like, you know what? And you have these gifts, these passions, these experiences. When did it hit you that, you know what? I am really onto something and this can really help people. I want to bring this to the world. How did that transpire within you?
First week in prison, I just was sharing. I got a kid that went to my rehab, and he's been sober a little over 6 months. Great kid. He's a fantastic musician. I really think that if he stays on his path, he's going to be a big name in music. I shared with him a small piece of my book that's about to come out. and it's talking about this moment really. And it really was where I started to meditate and go back and reflect on who I truly was. These
Mm.
moments in my life in which I felt weightless, I felt some piece of joy or happiness, or that I was in my element. And I started to realize that I felt most in my element when I was helping the neighbor kids become better athletes, have better attitudes. Even though my attitude was shit, I was working on making them better than me. And I started to think, okay, I think that helping other individuals be better is where I belong. And then I started to realize, okay, if that's what I'm supposed to do, then God has given me some type of gift that makes me effective, right? And I talk about in my book, I wanted to be a rapper in the first. I thought, okay, maybe I can be a rapper. I made music shortly after high school with some buddies of mine, and I really enjoyed that.
Right.
But I tested the spirit by the spirit, and as I, examined the idea of that vision, there was a lot of
Mm.
self-glorification involved in that. And I thought, you know what? That's not going to work, because that's never worked. Any type of glorification of self has never worked. And so then I started to realize, okay, I'm really good on a bicycle. Maybe what I'm supposed to do is get back on my bicycle and utilize my stick in the world that he gave me to make it a better place. And then the more I meditated on this, the more I started to realize, okay, maybe the reason I was good on a bicycle was that in this moment when I was here in desperation and I surrendered to him and I started seeking guidance, that he would show me that you had this gift the whole time. From 12 years old, you started getting on a bicycle. At 18, you're on the cover of the largest BMX racing magazine in the world. You're sponsored, endorsed by corporate companies like Fox and Airwalk shoes and Spy sunglasses that don't sponsor amateur athletes. Clearly, you had an exceptional gift, but you didn't use it for him. You didn't use it for the benefit of anybody else. In fact, you couldn't even benefit yourself because you didn't even know why you were good at it. And you
Mm.
took advantage of it because you didn't work hard. So then I started to feel that, okay, maybe what I'm supposed to do is take this gift. I'm supposed to exercise it to its fullest potential. That means every single day that I get up, I have to put the highest level of intention into the work of this gift so I can maximize its potential. And when its potential starts to manifest, it's then my job to take the manifestation of this gift and have something positive to give to the world. That was where the Free Will Project came from.
Mm.
My nonprofit organization that was originally the work that I was doing to give back starting back in 2011 and 2012 was an action sports nonprofit. Now I have my shtick, right? Like, this is what I love. I know this. I don't need to study a book. I don't need to do
Right.
anything. I have a genuine care for kids. Come to me through the likeness of wanting to be on a bicycle or a skateboard. But when you come into the realm of my space through this nonprofit, what you're going to learn and what's going to be poured into you is a direct benefit of you and not self, right? It's the perspectives. It's how to overcome adversity. It's how to feel good about yourself. It's creating a new belief system that isn't self-destructive, but self-empowering. So when you leave the program, you never forget it. It's a life-changing moment. And it started all the first week in prison when I really started to self-examine, why am I here? What am I good at? And how can I give what I'm good at to the world to make it a better place? And the more I sat on those visions and the more I sat and meditated on those types of things, the more detailed I found that these visions, or what I would call a calling, came, but it was through the footwork, right? You talked about it. You surrender and you don't know what.
Right.
Surrender, and then you're like, okay, maybe I'll do this, the footwork. You
Right.
get wherever it is that you're going,
Mm-hmm.
and then somebody shows up and says, Gary, awesome. I'm glad you surrendered. But now here is a whole list of things that we need to go through. Let's start here.
Yep.
And you say, I don't know how to do anything. Okay. If you say I need to do this, I'll go do it.
Right. And that was the surrender. That's part of the surrender for me. This is someone that just wired, Tony. Like, you told me to go that way. I am just gonna go the other way just because I was that stubborn. And I was that much, I don't like anyone telling me what to do at all. And if they're going over there, it means I'm going to smash my head in the wall, like watch out wall, because that's what I'm going to do. As
Taking
stupid as it
suggestions.
sounds. Yeah. I started taking suggestions. Prior to that, I went into a rehab too. And I've said this over and over. This is the first time when I got to that rehab, Tony, in 2002, I thought my life was over. I'm sitting in there like, now look at what happened. Now look what you did to yourself. How are you going to get out of this now? Like, look at your life now. But it was my first time I went to a meeting. I went around in a circle and came to me, and I can remember as clear as day. And I said, I'm Gary, and I'm an alcoholic. And it was boom. That was my truth, as much as I don't want to believe it. But, I remember.
For
Oh,
me, this happened to me the first time when I went to jail and then I was court ordered to rehab and I wasn't ready to surrender.
mhm.
One of the hardest thoughts that I had to deal with was, how am I ever going to have fun again?
100%. No, that's what I was getting at when I said my life's over. My
Yeah,
entire identity, Tony, was revolved around this party maniac. That's who he is. And listen, we all had fun too. I had a lot of fun times. I got the crazy stories to back it, but then it got really dark. And I loved the darkness too, Tony. I loved the isolation. I loved to be by myself. Had an abnormal love affair with this. And it got to the point where I'd go out with a bunch of guys and I'd Irish exit. I'd be, no one even knew. I'd just go and I'd find some dark hole, dark bar with no, I used to say, oh, it's beautiful out. Let's go find a dark bar with no windows and a jukebox. And I'll stay there all day long in that miserable life I was. But yeah.
yeah,
And that's part of what I said. I didn't know anything. I didn't think I could ever have fun again. How am I going
yeah,
to go to a baseball game? How am I going to do anything? I love sports too. How am I going to ever go to a concert? I go to Fish. Fish is I went to Fish is a big jam band, right? And I love them. I've seen
yeah,
them 50 plus times. Now I'm probably seeing them almost as many times sober, and it's beautiful.
yeah.
Like everything I thought I knew, Tony, was wrong. So the answer to your question is yeah, completely. How am I ever going to have fun? And this is, like I said, that was my identity. This is who I
Yeah.
was. And now it's not my identity today.
It's,
My completely different.
it's one of the most fascinating parts of addiction, if you ask me, is a person will come to PH Wellness. I'll be there running groups and they'll be in a similar position.
Mm.
Just not sure if I'm ready to quit. I don't know how I'm ever going to have fun. This doesn't seem like something that's going to ever benefit me. And yet they're in rehab.
Yeah, I know. It's
They've
amazing.
lost their job.
Right.
Their wife has kicked them out. That's why they're in treatment, because their wife left, took the kids. They're
Yep.
by themselves. They lost their job. They're in treatment, and they will look you in the face and say, I don't know how I'm going to live like this.
Right.
This doesn't sound fun. And it's like, yo, if you had a mirror or a camera that you could go back and watch, you say this while you're in treatment, you would see how baffling this is. Like,
Cunning
you're
and
thinking,
baffling.
how is life going to get any better? And it's like, yo, it can't get any worse if you keep going. You're already in rehab. I mean, obviously, jails, institutions, and death, but at the
Right.
same time, how can you not see that it only gets better if you just listen to somebody that's telling you it's getting better versus just doing what you've been doing the entire time? Because clearly what you do doesn't work.
Not working. 100%.
And to me, that's what makes addiction so fascinating, is that it absolutely stops you from seeing self until you're ready to surrender. Once you surrender, it's almost automatic that your willingness to take suggestions will follow.
It's that moment. It's that moment of surrender. It's
That's what
that
you
moment.
asked. It's that moment. Where
It,
was it?
it's
It's
that moment. Yeah. And it's hard. Like maybe you can't put a finger on it, but you bring up such a good point about the sickness when we're sitting in our disease. I'm sitting in my disease and the sense that I'm making, like, I don't know if I belong here. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Like, dude, look at where you are. Like you just said, we had a family friend member, reach out recently and they've been in and out and he just lost his family. He just lost, he got a DWI. He's probably going to lose his job. He's looking at, he's up against it, put it that way. He's living in some small apartment. He lost everything and yet he doesn't want to give up. He doesn't want to surrender yet. Right. So I was given that gift of surrender. And again, and that's the other point. We don't have to keep, there's always a lower bottom. That was the one thing I learned in rehab too, Tony, which sticks with me today. Like Do you think you're at a bottom now? Don't worry, keep digging. There's one thing we can always go
Always
lower from
do.
where
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah.
It's
You
amazing.
know, in this dynamic itself, if we're talking about surrender, I have often found that if they're younger, especially, a lot of times we can't get to surrender, not because the person's not ready to surrender, but the people around them aren't willing to surrender their need for control.
Mm. Now, how old are we talking about?
I think anywhere between 18 and 30, right? An
Yeah.
18 to 30-year-old will come into treatment, and oftentimes they have a mom, a brother, a sister, a wife
Yes.
who has to have absolute control. The
Right.
codependency is at such a high level
Right.
that they have to control every aspect of this person's life, even their treatment plan.
Mm.
Not realizing that when you insert yourself without recognizing your own sickness, your own codependency, that what you're doing is stopping that person from having a self-realization that everything that they've been doing is one giant delusion. Have you ever
Mm.
seen Shutter Island?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Great movie.
This is really what it is, right? Is if a person is set in a position where they understand that they need to do certain things to help this individual get to the end of this delusion, right?
Right.
Where you remove all of the enablement. You remove the money, you remove the ability to put gas in the car and show up to work, and you get them to the end of this delusion, right? That everything is in control and everything is working according to plan. Is that if you don't have this setup right, you can't take them like they were doing or trying to do in Shutter Island, is take this guy's delusion that something was happening in this prison and that there was this big conspiracy theory, and the doctors and the
Right.
guards were all in on it, right? The doctors, what they wanted to do, for those that haven't seen it, was let's see if we can't let this guy play out the delusion all the way to the end. And
Mm.
then at the end, we'll present them with the truth. And maybe then they'll have that aha moment where they're like, okay, I surrender. You're right. Now we can start working on the truth, right? What I have found is most people can't surrender early on in trying to get sober, not because they're not ready to get sober or surrender, but because the players around them haven't relinquished their control and need to insert themselves in a way that stops that individual from getting to the end of that delusion where we can say, take a look at it now.
Right.
It
So
doesn't work.
is it more on the other people though? Is it now, now we're digging into something different almost. I'd say like, I totally see it. And I know plenty of people fall under this category, right? But it's the other people, the mom or the whoever it may be, right? They can't give up. They're, my son needs me. I have to be there for him. And oh, what happened? What's going to be revealed, by the way, when he starts sharing his truths, because it's going to come back on whoever it may be, mom, dad, the brothers and sisters, right? So that's a twofold fight almost, right? It's one thing to come to your own self-realization, but now you're like, you have this other one pulling you the other way, and they want the best for you. They want you to get help. But by the way, keep all those secrets. Don't dare say anything out loud to anyone about, how you grew up, because that's going to be a reflection on me. I laugh because that's something that comes up often with my wife and I talking about like my childhood and stuff like that. And it's actually, we can move on, which moves to this. And by the way, dude, Shutter Island. Holy cow. Like that's who we are. That's who I was. Really? Like
No,
seriously, I was
it's
in a
it's
sick
one
delusion.
giant delusion,
It's
bro.
one gigantic delusion that gets worse and worse and worse. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden you're like, wait a minute. And I say this all the time, like, I know what'll happen, if I go and take a, sip of alcohol. I say that, you've heard it millions of times, just go play the tape, see what's going to happen, right? Play the tape. And so Shutter Island is one of the it's amazing where I was living in Shutter. We're all living in our own Shutter Islands
Yeah.
of delusion. And it gets worse and worse. Like the delusion gets worse and worse the more we're in it.
Well, an addiction is so, this is the cunning part, right? It's so shrewd. It's so incredibly
Yes.
smart that as the delusion goes, God has these moments where he's like, look at the mirror and
Right.
tell you can't see this.
Right.
You will instantly add, insert, and create more to the delusion so the self-justification can continue,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
The story just gets bigger and grander, and there's more pieces and more instruments and more characters. And before you know it, you're overwhelmed with this giant delusion that you have just continued to insert and remove parts, but put something else in. And it doesn't end until you surrender.
I love this though. I want to ask you though, when God, because right, He sends us those moments. You have those little. I'm thinking for myself. I remember having these little moments, right? Like, wait a minute, this is wrong, and there's more here, and you have that little like kind of breath, if you will, you know. But it's a topic that's been coming up, and it's a topic I'd say I'm fairly new to, personally, and it's childhood trauma, and it's when you look in the mirror, all our past traumas, if you will, or things that have happened to us or started to, not started to, I mean, I'll speak for me. I'll be the subject here, for 30 years or 25 years of feeling myself a certain way or being fearful of episodes that happened when I was a kid. Right. And, I mentioned this just, recently, one of my dad's got one dad had a bunch of guys over, and one of the guys, scared the living shit out of me. And I was 10 years old. Right. And so it wasn't the episode that he scared me. I went back to my room and I started crying because I felt like a coward and I didn't
Mm.
stand up to this guy. I'm telling you, I was 10 years old. This guy's a grown man, and I'm playing the tape through my mind. Like, I can take him. I can take him. And I held on to this, Tony, for so long without, and I learned this again in recovery because I learned so much about myself. But, it wasn't, again, it wasn't the event. It's what transpired after that. Started, growing this massive chip on my shoulder. I said, I'm not going to do that again. I don't care how big he is or what. I'm going to stand up for myself, and I'm going to stand up for other people, and yada, yada, yada. And listen, I think I think you can just look at my track record. Like, that's how I lived for so long. And so it was, my reactions to things, Tony's, were abnormal. They didn't line up with what was happening. What my reaction was so over the top. And I believe, doing some work on myself, because of stuff that happened when I was a kid, and
Sure.
stuff that morphs my mind, my being, right, and who I am. What's your experience with when you look in the mirror and you see, and then I can call my, look in the mirror and like, look at you, just nothing but a piece of shit, right? I think a lot of people of us can relate to that. I certainly have. I don't today. I don't wake up, necessarily on this high cloud. I get there, but what's your experience with childhood trauma?
So this is what I do with kids.
Yeah.
If I speak to schools,
Yes.
even if I speak at prevention conferences, because I do speak at a lot of healthcare conferences with adults, the story you create about your experiences, they're more important than the experience itself.
Yes.
Because the story you create is why you go do what you do in the world.
But we don't realize that we're creating the
How
story.
could you? How
Yeah.
could you? How old were you when that happened?
I was 10. And that was one of them. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
10. I just sat in on a really fascinating neuroscience presentation by a professor from Bucknell University.
Mhm.
And a kid that's 10 years old makes almost no decisions based on logic.
Right.
That means that every decision you're making, which is exactly the way you're supposed to be as a human, is about touch, feel, and see.
Mm.
Touch, feel, and see. You're going around, you're grabbing things, you're making friends with people, you're doing things, you're jumping off buildings, you're hitting things, you're setting stuff on fire, right? All of this stuff is happening that you're feeling. And based on how you feel, your brain makes a decision about whether it's good or whether it's bad. At 10 years old, if you don't have a safe space with trusted adults that teach a young person how to communicate what they're feeling as a result of some type of experience, what happens is same thing that happened to you happened to me. My father was my hero, still is my hero, even at 40 years old. My father was the one desired figure I wanted validation from in my family. I call it a hero dynamic. Every person in the household has a hero. A young person has a hero, and it's not something that you choose. I do not believe it's something you choose. I just believe it's something that's inside our spirit, inside our soul. We gravitate towards mom, we gravitate towards dad. That person is basically the bringer of light, the bringer of truth, the lesson of what to do, what not to do, how to communicate, how to process feelings, how to cope with experiences, right? I'm looking for my father to show up for my basketball games. My dream is to go to the NBA. I believe I'm going to go to the University of Michigan. After I graduate from the University of Michigan, I'm going to get drafted to the league. The only person I want to see that happen is my dad. But my dad doesn't come to my basketball games. My dad doesn't show up like other parents do. And I start to question myself because at this time I was already struggling with social anxiety.
Mm,
I started isolating away from people because I started to have that dynamic that we all have had where we feel different. We're not a part of the group for some reason. We
yep.
feel less of ourselves. We have these emotions that we don't understand that we're feeling, and we start to attach negative stories to these uncomfortable feelings that are quite natural for every single human being, right? But it's the story that matters.
Yeah.
How to think about what we're feeling. When my dad doesn't show up, I start to tell myself it's because my dad doesn't love me.
Right.
I start to tell myself it's because I'm not good enough.
Mm,
If my dad loved me and if I was good enough, he would be here like all of the other parents. So really what I'm doing is sitting down with a bunch of kids that are better than me,
yeah.
whose parents love them. That's why I'm here all alone. But the
There's a
reality
plan.
was my dad was working 14-hour days to put the best Michael Jordan shoes on my feet that none
Right.
of the other kids had. The $1,000 in baseball equipment that none of the other kids had. My
Right.
dad dropped out of high school because my grandpa said you can't marry mom unless you have $5,000 in the bank. Well, his sophomore year in high school, he's like, I love this woman. I'm going to get a job and I'm going to start working, put 5 grand in the bank, and I'm going to marry this woman. And that's exactly what he did. So he got in an industry where he couldn't just walk out and take off time because the industry was built on one manager. That one manager had to be there. There was no backup managers.
Right.
He ran operations, so he had to be there. And my games were at 2:30 in the afternoon, right before they were going to be the busiest they could be. He was at my soccer tournaments on the weekends.
Yeah.
He was at my baseball games at 6 o'clock. He could take off at that time, right? But I didn't, what I tell people and what I said in my book was I didn't want to be Tom Brady. I didn't want to be Lionel Messi. I wanted to be Michael Jordan, and all of my dreams were hinged on this one thing. But I failed to have a conversation with my dad. I never said, Dad, why aren't you coming to my games?
Right. Wow.
I feel like you don't love me. I feel like I'm not good enough. The childhood trauma in my household was not intentionally inflicted, like I believe it is in many homes. We do have the intentional inflictions, right? The sexual abuse, the
Mm,
physical abuse, the very heinous stuff that sometimes we don't want to believe happens to anybody, but it happens and it really messes up the psychological aspect of a human. But for me, it wasn't intentional. The abandonment, the emotional neglect wasn't intentional. My parents, grandparents, or my grandparents didn't teach my mom and dad how to communicate, didn't
right.
teach how do I feel? What am I feeling right now?
Mm,
And then provide parameters around what to do when we feel this way, right? So you feel like a coward as a result of this experience. A trusted adult comes in and says, Gary, using your words, how do you feel right now? And you
yeah.
say, I feel like I should have been there.
Right.
I feel like I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And then the trusted adult says, we call that feeling like a coward. We feel like we failed somebody. And as a result, we feel like we're a disappointment. Here's what we do when we feel like a coward. Here's what we do when we feel like we've disappointed somebody. Apply these parameters in your life and use them. Understand that you're feeling a disappointment and your feeling of cowardness, those will pass. You don't
Mm,
have to act on them yet. You can sit there and know that every human being will feel some type of similar response in a very similar situation. But what you do moving forward is the most important thing alongside what you tell yourself about it. Because Gary, you're not a coward. You're a 10-year-old boy who's learning how to manage life.
it's amazing, and I can relate to so many things you had just said too about your dad and everything. You know, same thing. And I'm reflecting on my own dad. Like he didn't show up to my baseball games. You know, and he was working 6 days a week too. You know, could he have gotten there? I think so, but that's for another story. My mom didn't miss a game, right? So I did have a mom at every single game I ever went to. And
Same,
me, what's that? Same thing? Yeah.
same. But my mom wasn't my hero, bro.
Well, that was the other question I wanted to ask you because when you said that, you know, I feel like, and I've talked about this, is I never had that hero. I never had it my whole life. And in fact, it was to the point where like if someone was in a circle and they're talking about talking about their dad, even the word dad, I would feel anxiety because you know what? Yeah, my dad loves me and I love my dad today. And I always did. And he always loved me. He did 100, like crazy love me. He did. There's no even questioning of any of it. And so you had talked about, I'm drawing a blank on the word, it didn't mean
Hero,
to.
hero mechanism.
No, they hear America, but I'm going to get there. But didn't realize, we didn't talk that way. Like, hey, Dad, here's my feelings. I feel like you don't love me. Like, there's the word feelings that probably never even came up once in our household, right? Growing
The
up,
same, bro.
right? Obviously across the board. I mean, that's
Yeah.
easy. But this hero aspect that you talk about when you're talking about, my eyes really perked up because Tony, I feel like I did not have that hero. My mom's 1 of 10. She has 7 brothers, amazing uncles. They all played sports. Look up to every single one of them. They taught me everything about sports, the jab step on the basketball court. And
Yeah.
there was my oldest uncle, the oldest of the brothers. He was the only one that pulled me aside a few times. I love that guy so much for doing that, for that one episode or 2 times that he really called me out, 1 or 2 times my whole life, because it never happened to me before. Like it never happened. So I'm hearing about this and I'm feeling a little anxiety about it and even a little resentment because man, well, it's poor me, right? I didn't have that hero,
I,
right?
I would I would encourage you to spend a lot of time meditating on that. And if you're in therapy now, and you're circling around childhood trauma, there's a book called How to Do the Work by
Mhm.
Dr. Nicole LePera.
Okay.
Absolutely fascinating book, easy to read, and transformational and informational. You do have a hero. You just have to figure out where your hero stopped showing up for you, and therefore you believed nobody was there for you.
Right. Yeah.
That's really what
So
happened.
kind of
At
just a
some
moment.
point, and
Wow.
you were probably young, the person that you were looking for wasn't there, and so you believed they couldn't be there. And then at some point, probably you noticed other people had heroes, and you didn't want to admit that your hero wasn't there for you. There's something there. I don't know how it comes about, but if you do that work, that self-reflection, you'll find what it is. And I think that it manifests itself. Are you married?
Yes, I'm married to the love of my life. We've been together forever. She's seen the good, the bad. We have a 10 and a 9-year-old now. We're at those ages, so I'm really
Yeah.
worried about them. But
But I preface that because Gary's needs as how old are you?
49 to be 15 July.
Gary's needs as a 49-year-old are very similar as Gary's needs as a 9-year-old. And so we can see how our partner oftentimes is a reflection of what was needed or even how we were treated when
Mm,
we were a young person. If we haven't gotten to a place of clarity where we recognize that our unhealthy attachment is actually connected to our early childhood and how it was framed for us, right?
mm,
But often, if we sit in our adulthood and we ask ourselves, what do I need today? Those needs are very similar to the needs of a 9-year-old when you remove the function of opening up a Capri Sun drink. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about emotional need
yes. Right.
and who we actually may have been looking to provide those needs to us specifically. The one that was able to make us feel less than, the
Mm,
one that was able to make us feel very powerful. My mom typically can't make me feel less than. She doesn't have that validating power in my soul. My father can speak whatever it is, good or bad, and make me feel powerful, but also make me feel very small. And that's why I know he's my hero, because his words have the ability to pierce my soul. He's the person I believe holds the keys to my future, even at 40 years old. And I think if you do the work and you meditate on it, somebody in there, somebody is it. And it may be your dad.
You're nailing me. I didn't think we were going to talk about me and you're going to help me out so much today. So I thank you for that, really. But you said there was a moment, and I always say this too within my therapies that there was a moment. Like I've seen my dad do a lot of stuff too, a lot of drugs and stuff in my house when I was the same age, and that's part of these little childhood traumas that I had grown up with. And I remember like say no to drugs was out in school. I think I was like in 7th grade, right? And so how old are you in 7th grade? 12 or something like that. And everyone's like say no to drugs, and it was a really big thing across the country if you remember. And I remember coming home and I was upset. My mom's like, "What are you upset about?" I'm like, And I just like, it burst out. I'm like, because, all the stuff that dad does, like, that's why, and saying no to drugs, but like, what about dad? And she's like, all right. And she's like, he's going to have to talk to you on this one. And so I forget where I was. It was actually, of all places, I think I went to the library. I don't know why. I never went to the freaking library, but this day happened to be a library, and he picked me up
Mhm.
and we talked about it. Right. And he's like, Gary, I never did anything. I didn't do anything. It's like maybe once or twice smoke weed, but I never did anything. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And that's the moment that you're talking about, Tony. Like, I was like, boom. Okay. I almost feel like I went from like innocent to like, all right, I'm on my own here. Like, cause I don't trust
Can't
anyone.
trust him, yeah.
And so that's the moment. And I'm like, oh, like hats off to you. Cause you're like, yeah, there was a moment. And that's one of the moments because it sticks with me to this day. Like I remember that. But he also talked a lot about meditating. That I want to ask you as well is you talked about meditating first week in prison. You talked about meditating on it now. I love to meditate. It's such I don't have a really good process. It's always moving. It's like a moving target. Can you
So
just give us some tips? Like tell us what you were meditating on that first week in prison. And if you would tell us what you meditate on today.
sure. So you got to remove the stigma behind meditation, first of
Hmm.
all. Meditation is not crossing your legs and holding your hands like this and humming. It doesn't have to be in a quiet room. It doesn't have to be in a certain location. It can be anywhere at any point in any type of situation. For me, I meditate best with music. The sounds of certain tempos and instruments will help get me to a state that I can stay in the thought pattern that I'm trying to be in. Sometimes I will meditate without any sound just because the clarity can be a little bit higher when I don't have any sound. But for me, meditation is always one about self-reflection, and that is kind of trying to go back with a third-person camera or a
Mhm.
camera that
Yes.
I get to watch myself from an out of body experience,
Yes.
to
Totally.
relive it, and in the program, take an inventory
Hmm.
of me in its fullness. Could I have done something different? Could I have changed the thought process about this event? And how can I improve if this was an unfavorable outcome? How can I improve that? That's my meditation. My meditation when I get to prison, though, is who am I? I don't
Yeah.
even know who I am. I can't even answer that. So I have to go back and I have to go over my childhood and ask myself, who am I? Where am I that confident person? Where am I that person at peace? And what am I doing? And what are these emotional qualities about myself? Because if I can define myself as an emotional person, Tony is a very determined, intense, compassionate, empathetic individual. If I just take these four as a foundation, I can go use these in a lot of things, bro.
Yeah, you can. And you
In a
are.
lot of things. I can use them in business. I can use them in sports. I can use them in relationships. I can use them in job places. I can use them in all types of areas, so long as the requirement for the position requires a strong-willed, determined individual where intensity is okay
Mm.
and compassion and empathy are welcomed, right? Because there are environments where compassion and empathy aren't welcomed.
Absolutely. No
Right?
question.
This is not a place to have feelings, bro.
Right.
If this is a place to not have feelings, Tony's not going to thrive.
Yeah.
Tony's going to feel like you've just smashed him down to this big and you
Right.
put him in this little box and said, go be Tony. Well, Tony's much bigger than that box, right? Because I have compassion and empathy, which means I can feel and experience other people's side of the street and decide, maybe we need to do more. Man, how can I support you? Can I give you a hug? How can I give you a kind word? You want me to just listen, right? Where get over it is not the answer from me
Right.
because I have much more complexity to me emotionally, right? So then I started to meditate on these things about who am I? What are my emotional states that make me a person? Because wherever I go in the world, I always have to stand on those four foundations, four pillars of emotions. And I can navigate anywhere in the world so long as that is me. Now, some people would argue this, and I even had a therapist who I didn't spend much time with say, I would argue that. She would say, you are, what do you go do? What do you like to do? That's who you are. No, those are my interests.
Right.
actually who I am. Because you could say, pardon my language, fuck basketball. That sport sucks.
Right.
Like, well, that sucks. You feel that way.
Yeah.
But you could say, bro, you're so fucking lazy. Like, and you care nothing about people. Like, you're so selfish.
Right.
And instantly I'm like, whoa, bro, you've got me mixed up.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
'Cause
where are you coming up with this? Right? Because you're now talking about me.
right. That's beautiful. Let
Not
me ask you
something
a
I'm
question.
interested in, right? And
Yeah.
so now meditation today is a lot about one, taking inventory.
Mhm.
How could I have done something different, be better, create a more favorable outcome, but also about the future. What do
That's
I what do I want from the future, Gary?
right.
What do I want my future to look like? Right? If we're talking about something tangible, I want floor seats to the Mavericks. Season tickets. I
Yeah.
love basketball, right?
Yep.
One of my safe spaces. It's one of the ways that my cup gets filled. It's one of the places that stress leaves me when I'm watching an NBA
Same
game.
here. Same here.
Right? And I think a lot of guys can relate to that. What do I want to feel when I'm sitting in those seats? What's the crowd look like? What game is it? What am I going to be wearing? How am I going to get there? I'm literally playing this tape of
And you're feeling it though. I think that's the
feeling.
important part,
I
correct?
feel, yes.
And you're doing it still you're looking at yourself, correct? You're the third person looking
Yes,
down,
third person.
sitting in front row.
Yeah, I'm seeing myself flash on the TV. I'm
Right.
seeing myself from my current seats
Right.
walk through the tunnel down to my seats and taking a seat. And I always picture myself in this green outfit. I have this green Leatherman jacket, and I have these shoes that have a hint of the same Mavericks green, right? I know what I'm wearing. I know where I'm coming from. I know how I sit down. I know what parts of the game that I'm enjoying, right? And that's something that's tangible. But I
Yes.
also have visions for PH Wellness, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's not that vision, how am I ever going to get to those floor seats, right?
Right.
Because my ability to effectively help more people at a greater rate or at a higher percentage than the next center is going to bring more people to me. It's going to be more people to my business partner, Matt, PH. That's what it stands for, Paz Hoffman. It's going to bring more people to us to make a positive lifelong impact in that person, which universally then puts us in a position to receive. Because when we give and we give effectively and we make change, then we also receive on our end. It doesn't have to be financially, right? But it's like, I'm thinking about, okay, how do I create the most awesome treatment center? And what is the one in Dallas that I want to be a $20 million facility that has a huge housing complex that nobody's ever seen before, and partnerships all over the United States with prisons that are going to send me inmates that have gone through certain rehabilitation programs that are looking for the next best step, where they come to my housing unit, and then my program provides them the skills, the opportunities to walk out back into society and be productive and be members that are giving and not just taking and committing crimes. It's like these visions that I have go through the entire mechanics of what I want. And then there's the one that's the toughest. It's when I make an immediate mistake and I have to sit with myself and I have to ask myself, how do I feel?
Mm.
Why do I want to go do that? What do I need to do from here? Do I need
That's
to pick up the phone? Do I need to apologize?
mhm.
Do I need to change my direction completely? What is actually happening right now? Because my old self was so impulsive, and there's still pieces of it there, Gary. The last thing you're going to get out of me is, look, man, in my 16, 17 years of recovery, I'm absolutely perfect. I've got it dialed in. If you sit around, Tony, it's like hanging out with Jesus himself. Nah. If you hang around me long enough, bro, you're going to be like, yo, he's an asshole sometimes. He has a very sharp tongue. Sometimes I can be unforgiving, and I have to take a step back, because when I go into those old states of self, I'm always met with shame and guilt. Always.
That's so important. You bring that up, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, right? So I could beat myself up too. Like, hey, I started the day on my knees in prayer, which I do every day. I meditated, start the day really feeling great. And then I'll go out in the world and, there's not enough room for me and you on the streets. I get the fuck out of my way. Like, what happened to that, like, Zen Gary? Like,
Yeah.
and when did I get there? Like, what just happened? Like, I don't
Yeah.
get it, and I'll beat myself up for it. But
Well,
it's
yeah,
okay.
'cause you feel shame. You
Yeah,
feel shame. You
dude,
didn't
you
want to do
feel like
that. You didn't
you're like an
want to do
asshole. Feel like
that.
a fraud. Like, you're a
Yeah.
fraud. Even though I'm praying, I'm meditating on my own, and then you get out and like get out of my way type of attitude. Like, you're just a fraud, man. And so yes, it's shameful, and I beat myself up for it. But so to give that message, like, listen, and I do this too. Like, you know what? I'm aware of it though today. Today, at least I'm aware of it. I used to walk through life like that, 24/7. Get the fuck out of my way. What do you do? Just total skeptical guy. I don't live that way anymore. And today, at least I'm aware of those things. But yes, we're human beings still. And so
Yeah.
you can't just, and it's not going to happen overnight. But again, zoom out, right, Tony? Like, I'm a light years better than where I was 18 years ago with that.
Absolutely. And this is why I think that meditation is a revolving door, a sliding scale, a continuum of progress, and it's something that should constantly be done.
Yeah.
Really, meditation is nothing more than, why am I the way I am? Who am I? Where do I want to go? What can I do? And the only way that you can meditate is by removing distractions. Just think of a monk. The Buddhist monks go into a temple
Mhm.
and they remove all forms of distraction and they
Mhm.
sit self. For most people, turning off a TV and sitting in a room is very difficult
Yeah.
because as soon as you do that, you start to feel anxious. You get bored. And I would say that if you're that person, this is the perfect opportunity to learn how not to be. This was one of the greatest things that prison taught me. When you're sitting in a cell for 23 and a half hours a day and it only cracks for 30 minutes to take a shower and there are no TVs and you're not allowed to send letters yet, and the only thing you have is that cellmate who's a skinhead that you don't want to talk to because his beliefs are so wild,
Yeah.
you get to a place where you can sit in one spot for hours and feel like, I'm fine. I don't need to go anywhere. I don't need to do anything. And in those moments, when you get to that place, you can fully, like in high definition, that camera that you're looking at yourself, it's so clear because you don't have any noise. You don't have internet. You don't have a cell phone. You don't have a TV show you're trying to watch. You don't have a relationship that's bending you through all these emotions that make it hard for you to just sit with yourself in your first place, right? That's why treatment is so great. Let's remove you from every distraction, including the substance that you're using to kill yourself, and put you in a controlled environment where distractions are minimal, the empowerment and opportunity for growth is maximized, and you can have these aha moments where if you've surrendered, you have all the suggestions being provided to you that absolutely will take you to the best days of your life. All you have to do is be willing.
And we bring it back to surrendering. I mean, that
Yeah.
is so perfect. It really is. One last thing I wanted to ask you too is when you were talking about when you had that, you have such a clarity about yourself, and it seems like you did that first week in prison. Maybe you did before you got there, but you have that clarity of yourself. And I'm speaking for myself because you mentioned empathy, determined, hardworking, like a lot of those things you mentioned. That's me. That's who I am as well. But there's times where or it took me a while to actually even believe that. Like, did you have a moment where, like, when were you able to give yourself the permission to not only believe those things about yourself, but you just know it because it's who you are? It's bursting through this camera as we speak. Like, did you have to? Because I know a lot of us out there, it's one thing to believe we're there, but it's this fight within ourselves that like you said, what we touched on earlier. We feel less than a lot. Like, was there a moment, or is there some helpful way for our listeners to give themselves permission to believe who they are and that they are those things?
I think a lot of that fear, if I were to personalize what you were saying, I needed approval of other people so bad for a long time.
Right. I get that.
And because of that, I had to be this tough, uh, cocky asshole that should be respected at every turn. And if you don't, you're gonna meet the iron fist.
Yes.
and I'll hurt you with my words. Parts of myself that I've had to really pack away and heal and learn how to manage in my present self. But for me, I had tried to do what everybody else told me I should do.
Yeah.
I've tried to be what I felt like everybody else was telling me I needed to be, and it didn't work. And I was in prison, like the worst place that you can go as a result of your thinking and behavior, right? The worst timeout that you can get. And when I started to meditate and realize that this person I was being is not the person I was, and I had this faith component, which I believed was driving me into this greater purpose of self, where I was going to enhance the world through the gifts that he gave me and the experiences that I was fortunate enough to survive. I didn't care what anybody thought anymore.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Because you know what, dude? You're going to make fun of me or talk shit, whether I do what you tell me I'm supposed to do or what I'm going to do.
Right.
I'd rather be me, knowing that at the end of the day, I was true to myself. I treated people to the best of my ability. I tried to give back to the world and make it a better place. And if you want to make fun of me for that, go ahead. That might hurt, but at least I know I was doing the right thing. At least I know I was moving to my North Star. And what I've learned is when you actually have the courage to say, you know what, I'm going to quit that job. You know what, I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to follow them. I don't care what anybody else thinks because I'm going to lose all my friends right now that just drink and do cocaine on the weekends or are addicted to pain pills and hustling through doctors and getting prescribed stuff for injuries that they don't have. I'm just going to go do this. You know what? I'm going to get out of that relationship that has been doing wrong for me. And I'm going to go find myself and attach myself to something that is more in line with who I am as a person. When you have the courage to do that and you actually start walking, knowing that you may not know how long you're supposed to walk, but if you walk, you'll get to the destination that you're looking for, or at least somebody will come alongside you in the journey and make the journey worth it. Because I think that's what we learn in the program, right? Is
No
we come
doubt.
in alone, beat up, feeling
Yes.
like life is completely over. They say, keep coming back, which is my way of saying, just keep walking
Yes.
and then wait for the miracle to happen. We think the
Yes.
miracle is supposed to be us, but it's really us getting sober and then helping somebody else get
Yep.
sober, and the miracle happens with them. That's the miracle, right? Is that
Yeah.
if you just keep coming back, eventually you find out who are you and all these other people. Whoa, I've got these people I like.
Yes.
We're going to do this and we're going to do that. These things I never even thought I would like. Or maybe I can go to a baseball game now, but I'm going with a sober buddy who
Yeah.
doesn't alcohol. And guess what? I actually remember what happened in the game because I was watching it. I wasn't just having fun talking or carousing with these other people. And so to me, it's you have to have the courage to let go of what other people think. Um, for what you know about yourself or what you believe you may think is different about you that you're not aligning yourself with properly. And if you just have faith, I promise somebody comes alongside of you. They give you the water, the food that you need, the encouragement until what? You love yourself and believe everything that everybody else believes about
Amen. I love that. You can't live in faith and fear at the same time, right, Tony?
you. You can't.
Man, that was so great. I couldn't think of a better way to end this, even though I want to keep going. I could talk to you for hours. When is the book coming out? Do we have a date yet?
I wish I could tell you, and it's my fault. I really just had 150,000 words written on a piece of paper, basically, and I handed it to my friend who does editing. And it's been like a year and a half. You know, the pandemic slowed it up 2 years, and we're close. I've got like 220 pages that she's edited, and it's really she's just so good at what she does. So soon, I'm hoping within the next 6 months.
Gotcha. And where can we follow you? Where can we find you? I know you're on Instagram. What are your handles? And please share it. We're going to share it in our show notes as well, but please let everybody know where we can find you.
Sure. Tony M. Hoffman on Instagram, TikTok, and X or Twitter. Tony Hoffman speaking on Facebook. One Choice Podcast, although I don't have any new podcast episodes since like 2019-ish, but there's like 100 on there. a lot of it mindset, a lot of it kind of the crazy stories that, that are entertaining, so
Yeah.
to speak. My website is TonyHoffmanSpeaking.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Tony Hoffman, just about anywhere, and I'm accessible. If you have a question, you want more insight about something you heard on Gary's podcast, reach out to me. I'll get back to you. I promise. Sometimes it might take me a little bit. Gary could attest to that. Um, but I do get back to you. I see them, and I just I'm like a call center. I try to just answer calls in the order that I'm receiving them. So
I hear you, and it sure looks like you got a lot on your plate. I can attest to that. And don't let him talk. Don't let him say he answered me very quickly. So, and tell us really quick. So it's phwellness.com as well, correct?
yeah, phwellness.com is my addiction treatment center. It's located in Southern California. We got a 4.5 acre property. We're licensing our third house, 18 beds, and so detox and residential. And we have a huge fitness component, a 5,000 square foot rec center with a gym in it, and we have really tried to take what's worked for us to try
Yes.
to for other people. And you can find out more about that at phwellness.com.
Amazing. And I'd be remiss not to mention that beautiful vision you have for PH Wellness and all that you're going to do. I know you got one person here that totally knows that's all going to happen. I appreciate you so much with you. We said I want to help one person today. You helped me for starters, and I know we're going to help so many people on this podcast. And I look forward to staying in touch, and we'll have to do this again, especially when the book comes out. We'll have
Yeah,
to-
man. Yeah, absolutely. And if you cut any of this up for media stuff to post, just please tag me in it, and I'll repost it. And happy to put your work out there.
I sure will, but I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to meet you today and pleasure to have you on. And I look forward to following you all you're going to do.
Thanks, Gary. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to another powerful episode of the Begin Again podcast. We sincerely appreciate your time and support. We hope that today's conversation has ignited a spark within you, affirming that recovery is not only attainable, but can also be a wellspring of strength and resilience. Our ultimate goal is to make a difference in someone's life every single day. By sharing these stories of redemption, we strive to empower you and inspire you to unlock your fullest potential, facilitate positive transformations, and contribute to creating a better future for yourself, for your loved ones, and the world at large. If you know someone who could benefit from listening to our show, please share it with them. And if you resonate with our mission and feel compelled to do so, we would greatly appreciate your support through a 5-star review, following us on Instagram, and subscribing to our YouTube channel, The Begin Again Podcast. The more positive reviews we receive and the wider our message spreads, the greater our collective ability to help others realize that change is possible in their own lives. Thank you once again for being a part of our community. May you be blessed on your own journey of personal growth and transformation.